we hear in the gospel the story of the talents being distributed to these three people when the master goes on a journey. And of course, master going on a journey is kind of like how the Lord gives us freedom to use what he has given us. But then at a certain point, he comes back, and each one of us is accountable for what we have done with what the Lord has given us. And of course, the Lord has given us everything that we have, everything that is good, everything that is of value. And so there's the question of, well, what do we do with what the Lord has given us? Now, kind of unfortunately, perhaps, I would say I kind of identify more with the third person in this story, the one who buried his talent in the ground, because he was fearful. He knew that the master, let me get the proper word here. He knew that the master was a demanding person, harvesting where he did not plant, gathering where he did not scatter. So out of fear, I went off and buried your talent in the ground. And I notice with myself, oftentimes there's tasks that need to be done, but out of fear, I can't do it right, I can't do it perfectly now. Next thing, I start fleeing from it. And oftentimes fleeing to areas of distraction, which could be playing Sudoku or watching YouTube videos or different things like that, eating more than I ought to be eating, just distracting myself from facing whatever maybe difficult task I need to face. And at the end of all of that, you still have the difficult task, but now you have less time to face it and to do it. So it's very easy for us to not make use of those talents that the Lord has given us. But if we do, we shouldn't use them in a way that we're comparing ourselves with others. Different people have different talents, but the combination of those talents makes things happen the way they're meant to happen, and all within God's providence. And so the one who makes 5 more talents gets the same word of encouragement as the one who gets 2 more talents, even though 5 is obviously a lot more than 2. But the talents were distributed to each one according to their ability. And so when the one who has 2 makes 2 more, the master says, "Well done, my good and faithful servant. Since you were faithful in small matters, I will give you great responsibilities. Come, share your master's joy." Exact same words that he spoke to the one who doubled his 5 talents to 10 talents. And so we ought not to compare ourselves too much to others, but rather work within God's design for us. And how do we try to figure out what is God's design for us? By spending time with him. Though God, in a sense, goes away, the master goes away, he doesn't go far. He's actually available for consultation at any time in prayer. Turn to him frequently. If you have the chance to come to Mass during the week, try dropping into Mass during the week. The church doesn't require it of us, but if there's nothing better happening in the whole wide world, which there is nothing better than what happens at Mass, then maybe try to understand that more and more and be able to come here when you have the opportunity. None of us will always have the opportunity, but try to make use of it while it still exists. Indeed, in the second reading, we heard, "For you yourselves know very well that the day of the Lord will come like a thief in the night. Do not let that day overtake you like a thief." Don't be surprised by it, but be well prepared. Now, there was this interesting thing that the master said to the one who buried the talent. "Couldn't you at least have just put it in the bank?" So what might be the bank? So interestingly enough, in one of the commentaries that I was looking at before or listening to before this weekend, he mentions the bank can be the church. Now, I'm not going to say put all your money into the offertory, although I'm sure Father Brian would be very appreciative of that. But rather, your talents. How can your talents be put to good use in the church? Recently, I had a funeral of a gentleman. I'd met him only once when I anointed him shortly before his death. And he was an interesting guy. He became Catholic later in life, although he was married to a lady who I suspect was a little bit like the lady in our first reading, who was a devout Catholic and just a very sweet woman. Something perhaps she might have done was reaching out her hands to the poor and extending her arms to the needy. But whether or not this gentleman was doing that, I'm not sure. However, at a certain point, the Lord sent somebody into his life. It was a priest by the name of Father Valentine. So literally, God sent him a Valentine, although oddly enough, it was a priest, a man who came into his life, but he was Father Valentine, named presumably after Saint Valentine. But this priest was a remarkable priest. He had a great heart for the poor. Out of his garage, he would serve the poor. He would be always collecting clothing, food, and different things like that. And he would go out and bring it to the poor, the homeless, the afflicted. And basically, whatever Father Valentine asked this man to do, he did it, and he did it willingly. He did it joyfully. So when I'm preaching at his funeral, it was actually quite easy for me to preach at his funeral, because I like to try and talk about what the Lord does in our lives and how we cooperate with that grace that God gives us. And I was able to say about how this gentleman, he fed the hungry, he clothed the naked, he brought drink to those who were thirsty, he helped the homeless. And not just that, even though he wasn't Catholic at the time, I don't think, Father Valentine asked him to help him serve at funeral masses. So he started performing these works of mercy, including burying the dead and praying for the living and the dead. Little by little, this gentleman was investing his time and his talents in the church and becoming ever more saintly. So how can we do this? I was struck by it in my own parish. Like it'd be wonderful to have something like that. In my old parish, I was saying to myself, there was somebody who did that. Now, I'm not a priest who can, say, "Oh, can you do this and help us out? Can you do all of that?" And not as forward as that. But there was a gentleman in my old parish, I won't say who, but who had set up a ministry that allowed many, many people in our parish to get involved in feeding the hungry, sheltering those who were homeless, giving drink to those who were thirsty, and having people encounter the love of Christ in their neighbor. And what a gift that was for the people who were able to do that. How can we pool our resources, in a sense, to do what the Lord asks of us? And you might want to ask yourselves that question. How can I support maybe the Vincent de Paul Society? How can I support not just monetarily, but even with my time and with my attitude, my interior attitude? How can I love my neighbor the way the Lord wants me to? And in that way, we're investing our talents in the bank of the church, that it will gain that interest, that the Lord will look favorably on us, and that one day He will say to us, "Well done, Wait, now, what was it he said? Get the right words here. Well done, my good and faithful servant. Since you were faithful in small matters, I will give you great responsibilities. Let us pray that we not let fear or competition or self-aggrandizement or anything like that distract us from what the Lord would want us to do, which is what will bring us true joy, true peace, and true happiness.